let's keep going. So this is how modern Spring Boot application work. So there are HTML, CSS, and front end take care of the server. Okay, server wants data, and this is backend. So how it works? We write our entities and we use Lombok Hibernate inside them. Lombok is for let me just show you. For example, add inside address and entity. Let's close all tabs. Entity address. Okay, we have entity. We say this is an entity and table, and we give a table name. And data, which consists of getter, setter, and constructor. Yeah, you can see required args constructor. And ID, sequence generator, and generated value from long ID. And relationships like many to one. But it depends on you. You can also hold IDs, and I prefer also holding IDs. It's a better practice. This is an old project of me, mine old project. So in entity layer, we had that, and by using Hibernate, it creates databases. For example, I'm using H2. It's an embedded database. It creates itself by looking at, oh, this is table, okay, it has this name, and it's the ID, it's automatically generated, etc. Or these might too, it depends. And then these entities are communicating with the repository or DAO with entities. Let's see what we have in address DAO. Okay, we have just this. It's an interface that extends JPR repository. This is, I just said, JPR repository is a collection of methods for reaching database. We only give ID type, which gets ID, and the entity type. So it gets entity and communicates with the entity service. Let's see what's in entity service. So entity service, we have base. We don't have the base, but it's a better practice. Let's see what's inside base. A base is a class. We extend that class with address and DAOs type. Okay, this is dependent, loosely coupled to the DAO. We understand this by this required arg constructor, and this arg constructor creates private final DAOs and injects them. So we get that right. And then this use entity. This is generic, of course. It might be complicated. I'm sorry. For example, we have final. Final gets find all. Sorry, find all gets all the entities and returns an entity list. And it used DAOs find all. Let's see what DAO find all. Yeah, it goes there. We can go. Okay, sorry, it's because it's generic. It has to go here. So where is it? Where is find all? Let me tell you, find all in JPR repository. It's defined. Let's see if we can see methods. Can't see because it's generic. Great. Anyways, for example, we can do find by ID. It's also in a method inside DAO. Find by ID. We can find by ID. We can also save. And DAO.save, we can also delete DAO.delete, or we can define our own operations like get by ID with control, as you can see here. or exists by ID. We check if it exists by ID, like Boolean. I think you get my point. Now, let me check the time. 5 minutes, great. Now, where are we at? Well, we are at entity service. So in entity address entity service, we did that operations, and in service layer we will inject this layer. We will create a dependency to the entity service in service. Let's see what we have in service. Let's see, find all. We just said we talked about find all, and here we find we injected the constructor entity service and we are using it. We are saying find all. Do you remember what we were getting in base entity service in find all? Yeah, we are getting a list of entities. Here we are adding it to the list of entities, but we are returning a mapper. So what about that? So the thing is, we don't want to send our entities to the controller. If it's a public controller, like if it's will communicate between our applications, it's fine. But if we are going to open this application to the public, for example, Android application, there are reverse engineering applications for Android applications. For example, I have any application, and the hacker guy, the bad guy, going to get that application's code, and if I share the entities, it works with entities, he can or she can see the IDs inside them, and IDs are really important. The long IDs we created here are really important. If he or she gets this ID, he or she the hacker can change the data in database, follow the path, find other things. So we don't want that. So we create a DTO. Let's see what we have in our DTO. For example, a DTO. We have the ID here. It should be here. Sorry, we got called. And say request. For example, say request does not have ID. If we had, for example, password, we could also delete password. And this also helps us to give less parameters to methods. It also helps us to do that. So DTOs, okay, DTOs, but how entity and DTOs convert to each other? By using a converter. For example, what we say here, service sends entity to the converter. Okay, where are our service at? This is our service. This is sends our converter, but we don't want to use converter. Do we have the converter? No, I deleted it. We don't want to convert because in converter we had to do DTOs. This is equals to this. Like, let me give a better example. Let's see, DTO. Okay, for example, country. Oops. Country ID. So I have to open country ID, get country ID, set country ID to country ID in DTO, and for the reverse operation, DTOs, get DTO, set DTO. By the way, this also has a setters and getters and setters. As you can see in the data, it has getters and setters. So we need to write a lot of boilerplate code, and we don't want that. So because of this, we use mapstruct. Mapstruct creates mappers by just seeing our method's signature. Let me show you. No, sorry. Mapper. Okay. Mapper. This is a mapper. We added a mapstruct to our POM XML. Mapper this is the reporting policy ignore. If it has not matching values, for example, our DTO has 6 values, or ID, our entity has ID, our DTO does not have an ID, what it should do, ignore, as we want it. So mapper creates, we just write this, okay? I want an add address, converter gets DTO and converts it to our entity. The name does not important. You can say Bob. You can write John. It's just a name. It just looks okay. What I'm going to do, I need to take DTO and return address, or I need to get address, return DTO, or get list, or other say request DTO. For example, in this one I don't have password. Another you should have password, but it's just an example. You get my point, I think. So what we did, send entity by using the mapper. It converts. We don't see converter actually. It converts. It creates the converters for us, and it creates DTO and returns DTO and communicates with the controller by DTOs. Let's see our controller. This is our controller. For example, find all. I said this is a REST controller. It has required as constructor because it uses service layer. So we inject it by constructor. And we say request mapping. We give path, as we just said. API version 1 addresses, plural. So for find all, get mapping, we say this is a get operation. We use a response entity. It has to return response entity. For example, we just said if it returns 2, it's a success. If it's 4, it's an error. 5, something else error. It returns response entities. So in find all, we get the service. Where's the service? Did I lost it? Let's scan. Okay. Let's close all tabs. Controller and service. Okay. Find all. Returns DTO. Right? Mapper converts this. Here. Gets it. Response. Return OK with this, with the DTO data. Return DTO data with the OK, which is 2 success, not an error, but message changed. Make message 2 starts with 200s. And as you can see, it's done. It sends it to the server. Server sends it to the front end, for example, my computer, and the front end. Friend of us takes that API and attaches with the button, for example, find all, what it can be. For example, there's a button, and in this button, when I click it, it finds all, and this how it works on the back end. Let's see if we have something else, or I'm done. Okay, yeah, I explained these. Map struct, response entity, in HTTP response. Optional. Oh yeah, optional. So we don't want to return null values from methods. An optional is an option for it holds null values, but not as null, because if you try to give null to a method like a parameter, it fails, and it's a really annoying thing in Java. You know, Java applications fail because of that. So a container object which may or may not contain a null value is optional list. An optional object is used to represent null value with absent value. Great way of returning values. And it also has a method like isPresence. I think I had it in base entity. Let's see, in general, base entity service, yeah. But yeah, as you can see here, find by ID returns Find by ID. Where is the find? Oh, okay. Find by ID is in JPR repository, gets entity in optional list, and by calling it here with control, we set it in optional list, and if entity optional is present, we using predefined methods is present, which means like is it absent? We don't have null in optional list, I just said. And if it's not null, actually presents entity optional get, else throw new item found exception, gen error message, item not found. Yeah, we explained that. Entity layer, repository layer, DTO converter, service layer, controller layer, and it's done. I guess that's all. Thank you for listening. Take care.